Joining us now, we have Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's the author of the new book entitled The Scheme, How the Right Wing Used Dark Money to Capture the Supreme Court. And we will get to that in just a moment. Congratulations on the book, Senator, but I want to talk to you about the midterms. And I'm curious, as we look at Pennsylvania and we look at Georgia, we've got two Republican candidates who, to say the very, very least, have had trouble telling the truth over the years. I mean, that's in the fairest, most simple terms. But we could go deeper into the problems with the Republican candidates. But my question to you is, why are the Democrats not doing better? And in those races and others, is it the candidates or the message?
I would say it's neither. I would direct your attention to the recent NPR story that said that Republican Senate candidates are about to hit $1 billion in dark money spending for their benefit. That if it weren't for this dark money spending, they would be swamped on the airwaves, that it's nearly 90% of the funding supporting them. And my personal feeling, I'm a bit of an outrider on this, but I think we've missed a huge opportunity with voters who are sick of the dark money, sick of the corporate influence, sick of not being listened to draw the connection between $1 billion to Republican Senate candidates and what Mitch McConnell is likely to do for those donors hiding behind the dark money.
So you think it's just dark money? I mean, in these two races that I'm using examples, that the candidates could not be more. There could not be more of a contrast between the candidates, and yet they're so tight.
And one side has a $1 billion fire hose pounding all sorts of smears out onto the TV screens of an anxious population. And I think that gives them an enormous advantage. I think that we'd be in a completely different position if it weren't for $1 billion worth of dark money spending. And the Republican Party should be held accountable for what it's giving up to get that $1 billion. People don't give them $1 billion for nothing. There are deals behind that $1 billion, and we ought to know what those deals are.
And we're going to talk more about that in your book, Senator. But to Mika's point, you agree that inflation at 8.2% is not the result of the $1 billion of dark money. So what is the message from Democrats right now in these last 12 days for people who say, far and away, the economy and inflation are the number one thing on my mind?
I think we go to the record of what we've actually done to lower costs for consumers and point out that fuel costs, drug costs, and fair taxation are all Democratic priorities, and that the Republicans are not going to do a thing about it. A Republican Party that is funded by the fossil fuel industry is never going to take on fuel costs in a serious way. A Republican Party that is getting huge secret money from pharma is never going to help lower drug costs. And we've seen them dump $2 trillion in high-end tax relief for billionaires and big corporations. So the idea that you can trust them with the problems to solve the problems that they point out, I think is pretty well ludicrous in terms of what the record shows.
Senator, good morning. One of the other major issues for voters' minds per polling are threats to democracy. That ranks behind the economic issues that we were just discussing, but certainly something in the aftermath of January 6th, the hearings we saw all summer, something that people are concerned about. What in this closing argument, this closing stretch of the campaign, what in particular on that do Democrats need to say to voters to say, look, if you put the other guys in charge, this whole thing could come crashing down?
I think it ought to be pretty clear that one of the biggest threats to democracy, if not the biggest threat to democracy, is the unlimited anonymous money that has just sluiced into our politics like a tsunami of slime, and what that is doing to the ability of ordinary voters to be heard. Again, there are probably only 4, 5, 6 interests that are behind that $1 billion in spending for Republican Senate candidates, and they will have demands of Mitch McConnell. And he's not going to listen to voters. He's going to listen to people who are willing to put $1 billion on the line to push his candidates forward.
So you've had a very good message discipline here. Why don't we get to the book? Tell us what the scheme is, and what exactly can be done. Is this corruption? Is this criminal? Explain it.
Well, it's for sure corruption, as the founding fathers would have defined that term. I first noticed it when I was looking at why Republicans at all evaporated on climate change. When I got to the Senate, there were Republicans working on climate change. As soon as Citizens United was decided, as soon as the dark money flowed in huge denominations after that decision, they all stopped. You couldn't get a Republican near a climate bill. And so I began to look at that apparatus that was pushing climate denial, that dark money apparatus. And then I began to see that it's a lot of the same groups that are backing the Republicans, just like we described in the $1 billion in this election for Republican Senate candidates. And then as I looked at the Supreme Court, I began to see the same groups showing up there in the effort to pack the court, in the effort to make sure that Garland did not get on the court and that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett did get on the court. And all of the machinations that we had to live through in the Senate as they rammed those judges through against all sorts of Senate precedents and traditions and rules. So this book is about the way that the dark money effort, that apparatus, over time and with over $500 million, actually has packed the Supreme Court, captured it the way the old railroad barons would have captured a 19th century railroad commission.
The new book is The Scheme, How the Right Wing Used Dark Money to Capture the Supreme Court. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for being on this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
We have